Thank you. It is with honor that I get to introduce to you a longtime friend of the Stillwater Frontier Rotary Club. Jenni Carlson has been here on many occasions. Just got back from Las Vegas, which to me bodes the question, out of 16 excellent Big 12 destinations, why could the meeting not have been in one of those locations? But that's a whole nother subject, and not Jenni's fault. But she did just get back, and also I can't wait for her to tell you kind of what happened in Vegas, but also about her new gig, and maybe a little bit about her partnership with the organization I represent. There you go. I didn't say it out loud.
Oh, I have my own mic. I don't need that one. You can say it's Visit Stillwater, Christy. This isn't like... Oh, sorry. I didn't know that was a thing. Oh, well. Oh, well. Well, it's awesome to be back. I think I was here about a year ago, and Chris asked me to come back, and then he promptly decided to go on a softball trip. So that's what I get for saying yes. So next time, maybe he needs to be fine. Could we work that out? Okay. All right. If you're watching on YouTube, Chris, you've been fine. But yeah, no, I'm so grateful to be back. The last time I was here, I had a chance to share with you when I was getting ready to start work for Sellout Crowd, which was an all-internet website doing sports, covering all sports in Oklahoma. We didn't make it to my second appearance, or my next appearance, unfortunately. Sellout folded in May, and so everybody that was working for the company has kind of started to find new jobs, and I'm still in the market. I'm not leaving Oklahoma, so I've been here too long and love being here too much to go anywhere else, but I am still sort of talking to some different people that might have a job that I can either continue to cover the sports here or maybe cover something more nationally but live here. Yet to be determined what happens with that. But in the meantime, I did not want to just sit and wait. So I decided to use the tools that are now available to writers, which is pretty awesome when you think about it. If I'd have been in this situation maybe 10 or 15 years ago, I really would have just had to kind of wait until that next opportunity came along. But I launched my own website on basically a service called Substack that is kind of publishing for dummies, basically, and which I'm thankful for because I'm not very tech savvy, but I'm able to use Substack to publish whatever I write. I'm actually also able to use it to put my YouTube videos, which I still do my show, my podcast show. I still have Barry Trammell, who I was with at the Oklahoman for 24 years and then went to Sellout Crowd with. Still have him on as a regular guest, but also have other guests on. I'm actually glad to welcome later this week Lance Walker, who heads up the Human Performance and Nutrition Center that has started up on campus here. He actually, or on campus there, I forget where I am, but he is he's trained high-level elite athletes, including I think some that may be at the Olympics this year. So I'm excited to talk to him about that, but also what he's doing here at Oklahoma State. And I'm also going to ask him if he has any tips for us mere mortals, because I figure I'm not going to be running like I don't know, who's the great sprinter now? Sha'Carri Richardson. I'm not going to be running her times anytime soon. But, you know, maybe if I can, you know, get out there and do a little something, maybe Lance has got some suggestions. So Substack has been great. JenniCarlson.substack.com is my website. But if people subscribe, and it's free, you can subscribe for free, check things out. Or if you want to support my work, I've got monthly subscriptions as well. But every time I post something, it sends an email right to your inbox. It's kind of like the digital version of your newspaper. I'm not throwing it in your driveway, but I'm going to send it right to your inbox. So it's actually the Substack platform has really been great. Like I said, it enables me to do everything myself in essence, which is both, you know, kind of good and a little bit scary, because sometimes I think I need an editor. I need a backstop here. I can't believe they're just going to let me put this out into the world. So, but no, that's been great. So people have been excited to join. I've got a lot of subscribers, some paid and some free, and it's great to have the mix. I haven't decided to go all paid yet because I don't frankly know if I'm going to continue to do this as my full-time gig or if I'm going to get a more traditional job and continue this as a side thing. But for now, this is how I'm telling stories of sports in Oklahoma. And earlier this summer, I decided part of that was I need to get to Big 12 and SEC football media days, which of course I'm doing my own thing at the time when the two schools in the state are now in separate conferences and I've got 2 media days to get to. And as Christy alluded to, one of them decided to have their media days in Las Vegas. Why can't they be in Dallas like they've always been in Dallas? It's so easy. But the SEC actually did decide to go to Dallas. I think they sort of saw an opportunity when the Big 12 decided to go to Las Vegas to have their media days in Dallas. And with Oklahoma and Texas joining them, they thought that was, I think, a good time to make that a Dallas-based, Texas-based media days. So that one wasn't so hard. But getting to Las Vegas, a little trickier. You know, there's a plane involved, and there's hotels in Las Vegas that like to, charge people to come in and gamble. So I knew that the trip would be a little bit of a challenge. And so I decided that I wanted to explore getting a sponsor for what I was doing for Big 12 Media Days and then potentially for SEC Media Days. And Chris Norris, who I mentioned earlier, I was texting with him one night saying, Chris, I'm trying to figure out, is there anybody in Stillwater that you think might be wanting to get their brand associated with Oklahoma State football, Cowboy coverage that, might want to at least talk to me about doing this. He said, why don't you come up? And so I came up the very next day, had lunch with Chris, had a chance. I actually met Corey Williams over at Hatch, their new restaurant. That area is going crazy. I couldn't even believe everything that was there. It was so cool. Had a good conversation with him. Sort of started to talk about who could I talk to, but then Chris wanted me to go meet with Christy. Okay, let's go. So we go out, and I don't know, was I there 5 minutes before you said yes? I wasn't there for very long before Christy said, well, we want to do this. And so Visit Stillwater became my sponsor for Big 12 Media Day, which was absolutely awesome to have that support when, Christy didn't know what I was going to do with it. I thought I had a pretty decent idea, but there was no track record. She just on blind faith said, yes, we want to partner with you. We see, that you're getting your message out to Oklahoma State fans. They're interested in what you're saying. We want to partner. We want to help you. So thank you. Appreciate that. And so off I went to Las Vegas. 2 days. Thankfully, they did not make us stay in that heat for any longer than 2 days. We just missed the hottest day in recorded Las Vegas history by a day. It was 120 the day before we started. The morning that I actually flew in the day that Big 12 Media Day started, and so I got on a plane fairly early at Will Rogers in Oklahoma City to fly out there directly. And the pilot, they announce flying times, whatever, and the temperature in Las Vegas right now is, and I think he said 99 degrees. And so it was like 5 a.m. in Las Vegas at the time, and I thought, that had to be a mistake, right? That, surely not. 99 at 5 a.m., is that even possible? So I pulled it up on my phone thinking, no way, it must be 89 or 79, and he just screwed up. It was 99 degrees at 5 a.m. in Las Vegas that day. It was 118 the first day we were there, and Oklahoma State was actually one of the 8 teams that was there that day. They actually had to delay their flight home because they couldn't take off. It was so hot. I don't know how that happens. I don't know what happens to make it too hot to take off. Somebody who knows more things about flying and aviation might tell me, but something about lift. I think I heard the lift, and when it's that hot, all I know is the next day when I flew out, I was hoping, God, I hope it's not too hot. Let's get out of here. But yeah, it was very, very hot. But I would not have been able to be at Media Days without Christy and Visit Stillwater's help. I got a chance to see 4 new teams. Obviously, the 4 Corners teams that have joined from the Pac-12. Everybody's pretty excited about them because with Utah, Arizona, those two teams are going to be in the mix. I think Oklahoma State's got a great chance to win the whole darn thing in the Big 12 this year. So I think they've got a great team coming back. We can talk about that. I'd love to answer any questions you've got about football, because I'm starting to think about it a whole lot more. They start practice in less than a week up on campus here. The 31st is their first day of practice. So it is not just right around the corner. It's really here. So I got a chance to interact with Utah and Arizona. And Utah will be here. That's actually Oklahoma State's Big 12 opener. It's also Utah's Big 12 opener. So the fact that those two teams that are probably going to be in the mix for the championship will play very early on, that's really an intriguing game. Then Arizona State comes in here. Arizona is not one of the teams that OSU has to play. Obviously, with 16, you can't play everybody. But Arizona returning a team that was a 10-win team a year ago, lost their coach, had a lot of guys stay, including their quarterback. So I think they're in pretty good shape. But I think Utah, Oklahoma State, and probably Kansas State are the three teams that I think are best equipped to win the Big 12 this year. And OSU starts with Utah, and the very next week they go to K-State. So it is definitely going to be imperative for the Cowboys to get off to a really good start this year. But I think they've got enough of a veteran team that they can do that. But it was seeing Arizona, Utah, and then obviously the other two, Arizona State, and of course Colorado. Deion Sanders is a force of nature that unless you see it, it's kind of hard to describe, quite honestly. He was first up on the second day, the first coach to hit sort of the main stage press conference, and he walks up on stage. He's got on his sort of signature now hoodie that he always wears a hoodie, sweatshirt, which he had on. He was wearing sunglasses when he came up onto the stage, and I'm pretty sure it's the first time any head football coach has worn sunglasses into their press conference at media days. I think he made history right there. He did take them off, so that was good of him, but there's such a vibe and an energy around him, and he's a big part of that, just his energy. But a lot of it's just people there's a lot of people that want to know what he has to say, what he thinks about things. Even though Colorado, I know some people might be thinking they're going to be a contender in the Big 12. I would doubt that. They were not great last year. Won their first 4 games, then I think lost their last 8. So did not have the depth to really keep up. And I know that you can do a lot in the transfer portal, but we'll see. I'm a skeptic when it comes to Colorado. I think they're probably still a ways away. I think they'll be better, but not as good. But Deion brings he's just such a persona. He's almost like a brand unto himself that his team doesn't have to be great for him to sort of draw attention, which for the Big 12 I think is a good thing. I think having, when you lose brands, that everybody recognizes around college football in OU and Texas, I mean, those two, whether you like them or not, which I know the sentiment up here probably leans towards the latter, it's all right. Whether you like them or not, people know them, and the brands really carry a lot of weight. And it especially carries weight with broadcasters and people that pay the conferences money. And so for the Big 12 to have lost those brands, it's not good, but then to bring in some teams that are good, and then to bring in a brand like Deion. Obviously, they kind of lucked into that. They had already kind of started those conversations, I think. I can't remember the exact timeline. Deion may have already been there, but he hadn't even coached a game yet when they invited Colorado into the Big 12 a year ago. So I think, needless to say, I think there's a lot of people in the Big 12 offices that want to see Deion do well and keep his job for as long as possible. So they probably can't cheer out loud for the Buffaloes, but I'm pretty sure that they want Deion to stick around for a while. So he was definitely the star of the show in day 2. He was actually talked about a whole lot on day 1 when he wasn't even there. So he was definitely the biggest name at Big 12 Media Days. So it's still wild to me to see like Cincinnati, people walking around. Sometimes I see, these coaches and players, and I think, well, why the heck are they here? And then I'm like, oh yeah, Gus Malzahn and UCF, they're in the conference. Yeah, they were in the conference a year ago. So I still have a hard time with the 4 who were new last year, and now there's these 4 new ones. So it's going to take some time to adjust to the fact that, you know, these teams are in. Just the same way it's going to take some time to adjust to the fact that, you know, the Big Ten stretches all the way to the Pacific Ocean and UCLA and USC, and that's, you know, still strange to me. So it's all going to take a little time, I think, to sort of settle in our brains, but it's going to be fascinating to see how these new teams and new conferences, how do they affect things? How much does it change the dynamics? How much does it change the dynamics in the Big 12? I think Utah could be a real player for the conference championship this year and probably for a long time to come. But, you know, are those other teams going to be really up in that upper echelon? I don't know. Remains to be seen. So I think that's going to be fun, sort of the unknowns of what do those teams bring to the table. So, and then I sort of hit repeat last week, went to SEC Media Days down in Dallas. Unlike the Big 12, which had 2 days, very condensed timeline, 8 teams a day, so it was sort of nonstop action, the SEC split theirs over 4 days. So it was much more elongated. We had 4 teams a day for 4 days down in Dallas, which it was a different vibe, it was a different feel. The SEC is very much, you know, their schedule is based strictly on this athlete's got to get here, this coach has got to get there. If this is how long they're supposed to be sitting here talking to you, as soon as that time's over, they're going over here. So it was very much regimented, and there was not any deviation from that. The Big 12, a lot of you know, athletes, a lot of coaches stand around. You get a chance to talk, get to meet, get to, you know, talk more about maybe stories you're working on. The SEC, if you didn't get them at the time that you knew they were going to be right here, you might not see them again. So it was a little bit different, but still, again, interesting in that it was new and different. And, you know, everybody sort of knows who the headliners are in the SEC, Georgia, Alabama, at the top of that list. But sort of seeing how some of the other teams were, you know, for people here in Oklahoma, some of the coaches at some of the other schools, Josh Heupel was obviously the OU quarterback in 2000 when they won the championship. He's now the coach at Tennessee, so that was interesting to sort of see him, interact with him. Shane Beamer was an assistant at OU very recently. He's now the head coach at South Carolina. So some familiar faces in different places, but, you know, it was interesting to me, even with you know, some really high-profile coaches and players and teams around. The very first day, the last team that was in the main interview room was Vanderbilt. And there was about as much excitement for Vanderbilt as, I don't know, let me think, when Baylor or Kansas were really, really bad back in the day. I felt kind of bad for the Vanderbilt players, but I was like, I don't really know what I would go talk to these guys about. I'm sorry. So I didn't help out. I was not helping those Vanderbilt guys, but it was definitely an interesting experience. And again, I don't know how it's going to play out. I don't know how OU's going to do. I think they've got some deficits that are going to be exposed in the SEC, especially at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. But I mean, I talked to somebody at SEC Media Day who's actually got, he was at OSU for a while. He's got some OSU connections, and he's seen enough OU. He said, I just think everybody's going to say they're not going to do very well, and then we're going to look up at the end of the year, and they're going to have won 10 games. So I was like, well, I guess that's possible. I don't think that's going to happen, but I guess that's possible. So I'm excited about this season just because there's so much unknown. And that's probably true every year, but it just feels way more uncertain with all the new conference alignments and stuff. So I'm really excited about what's to come. And like I said, I think Oklahoma State's going to have a great chance to win the Big 12, to go to the expanded college football playoff, which could mean there could be a playoff game in Stillwater, America this year. That would be amazing. Oh, I've heard the new executive director of the college football playoff talk about these home playoff games, which, if you don't know, by the way, quick aside, the the former executive director of the college football playoff is Bill Hancock. And Bill's son, Will, was the PR guy that was killed in the men's basketball plane crash. So Bill has a very long association with the state of Oklahoma. Fantastic guy. Was so sad to see him retire, but that was selfish because he's done a ton. He was the executive director of the Final Four for many years. So the Final Four, college football playoff, he's impacted 2 of the biggest sporting events we have in America. he deserves to have a chance to retire. But I've heard the new executive director, his replacement, a guy named Rich Clark, I've heard him talk at both media days. Rich is actually retired Air Force. He flew in combat. He's, I think he was a lieutenant general. So, you know, has been in front of Congress. He figures if he's been grilled by Congress, surely he can handle college football fans. Yeah, we'll see. I like his chances, but you know, there's some crazy people down in the South, especially. But yeah, I've heard him talk a couple of times, and both times one of the things he talked about that really sort of got me going, got me excited, was this idea of the first 4 playoff games, and the expanded playoff this year will be on-campus games. The top 4 seeds in the playoff will be automatic byes the first round. But the first 4 games, which will be, so it'll be seed number 5 versus seed number 10 and on down, you know, 5, 6, 7, and 8 will be your host teams. They're going to have on-campus playoff games. That will be so cool. I mean, and I think Oklahoma State, if they win the Big 12, they're probably going to be one of those top seeds, because the way they're going to do it is the top 4, the 4 conference champions that are ranked highest, which are likely to be the SEC, the Big 10, the ACC, and the Big 12. Those 4 conference champs are likely to be seeded 1, 2, 3, and 4. Unless there's a group of 5 team that just has an outstanding year and they jump up there. But that's more than likely not going to happen. So your conference champs will be 1, 2, 3, and 4. But let's say Oklahoma State makes the conference championship game, has a great year, but doesn't win. Then I think they might have a chance to be in that 5, 6, 7, 8 range and host. And who they might host is, I mean, it's anybody's guess, obviously, but it could be, I mean, it could be OU, for crying out loud. Could you imagine? Could you imagine a Bedlam game and a playoff game on campus? Ah, it makes my brain hurt just thinking about how exciting that would be. But yeah, these on-campus playoff games are going to be so fascinating, because obviously, even at places that have had huge football games on their campus, I mean, think about that Bedlam game last year. I mean, that was a huge game. But even if you've had something big, like a game that determined who was going to play for a national championship, or a huge rivalry game that becomes well-known, there's never been a game on your campus with these kind of stakes. So whether it's Oklahoma State or Alabama or whoever, like, they've never had a game at this level on their campus. So I just think it's so amazing to think about what that would look like, and it's going to be in December. So, I mean, we don't know what the weather's going to be like in December here. It could be 75 degrees, or we could have an ice storm. I mean, there could be a game in Ann Arbor, Michigan. What might that be like in December? There's just so much about these on-campus playoff games that has me thinking about possibilities that I really can't wait to see who those 4 seeds are and what those matchups are. So put that on your radar. Remember December. You might have reason to want to be in Stillwater for a little football fun. So that's really cool. I don't have too awful long left, and I want to take some questions. I have rambled and rambled, but I would love to answer anything that anybody wants to ask about. Yeah.
Thank you. Do the games that we played on campus, does that take away from the number of bowl games we're going to have next year?
No, the bowl games are set, and they'll stand, whether they're in the playoff or non-playoff games. So yeah, I don't know long term what's going to happen to some of the non-playoff bowl games. I don't know if, you know, Liberty Bowl, like, is that long term? Can the Liberty Bowl survive? I don't know. But for now, the bowls, all the bowls are intact as is, unless something, if there's a bowl that's not being played, it's not because of the playoff. Let's put it that way, because sometimes bowls ebb and flow and you kind of lose some, but they were not lost because of the playoff. And they'll rotate the bowls that are involved. Fiesta, Cotton, Rose, Sugar, Orange, I think are the 4 that are involved. They'll rotate those between quarterfinals, semifinals, and I think the national championship game goes somewhere neutral, somewhere big. You know, like it may be in Vegas in a few years, something like that. But as far as the bowls, they're all intact. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Jen, good to see you in person. I read your columns every morning.
Thank you.
There's been a lot of speculation about the ACC,
Yep.
especially Florida State and Clemson and some others. Do you see 3 to 5 years down the road, if they get that litigation resolved, any of those teams coming into the Big 12?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, that I actually did some homework on that litigation earlier this week because I was sort of I knew enough, but I hadn't paid attention here recently, so I wanted to sort of see where things were. And I guess the ACC has also sued the schools. So there's just all sorts of ongoing stuff that I don't know how quickly any of that will get resolved. Obviously, the ACC is going to fight like heck to keep them in, to make them stay as long as they can. But what I have read is that if they're cut-free, it doesn't sound like the SEC or the Big Ten are publicly saying they're interested. And mostly, near as I can tell, the reason for that is because as it stands right now, the pie that they have to cut up and distribute amongst their schools would remain the same size. If they added 2, they would just be cutting up into smaller pieces to add the 2. Now, as far as the Big 12 goes, Brett Yormark, the commissioner, has continued to be bullish about saying that they're open for business. So I think the conference most apt to call them right away would be the Big 12. But I can't imagine that the SEC with Clemson and South Carolina and Florida State and Florida, yes, it's 2 states they already have, but they have rivals in their own league with those schools. I just can't imagine that Greg Sankey and the SEC doesn't talk about it. And I also can't imagine that if you're a broadcaster, because we know how powerful football is, and those 2 brands for football are so fantastic. I can't imagine I don't know if the Big Ten's a player. I mean, even though they went way out west, that feels like maybe a bridge too far to go down there. I don't know. That seems crazy to me. But this whole thing seems crazy to me sometimes. But I do think the SEC, because they're right there, I just think they'll have to think about it at least. And maybe their TV broadcast partners, maybe they can have some conversations and say, if we add these 2, will you renegotiate? Because they're so powerful in football. That's what it would, I think, take. But I don't have any doubt that if those 2 become available, the Big 12 is on speed dial with them immediately because it's not so far. I mean, it's just a continuation of the geography. They've obviously, Big 12's already in Florida with UCF. Clemson would just kind of add to that part. I think it's a natural for them to go look at those 2 if they become available.
So I'd like your take on what you believe are the primary reasons why Alabama has been such a strong at the top of their league, their conference for so long, for so many years, back to Bear Bryant. What is it that they seem to consistently be up there over the long haul?
Yeah.
Can you enlighten us?
I'm sure there's a lot of football coaches that would like to put whatever they have in a bottle and and use it, because But the thing about Alabama, though, they had some down years. They haven't always been where they have been under Nick Saban. I'm really curious to see the new coach, Kalen DeBoer. Obviously did great at Washington last year, got them in the national championship game. So I know he's a heck of a coach. Can he continue that? Because they've had some guys that haven't lived up to the Bear Bryant standard. I mean, Mike Shula was there, did not do great. They hired Mike Price, which became a big train wreck after his scandal broke. If you don't know about Mike Price, feel free to Google him when you have about 3 hours to go and figure all that out. But anyway, so they haven't always had home runs, but of late it's been a lot of home runs. And I think that tradition is very powerful. I think they also benefit. I had a coach one time tell me, an assistant coach tell me that recruits, and this was probably, I don't know, close to a decade ago, recruits are so focused on getting to the NFL. And obviously if you can go somewhere and win and get to the NFL, okay, that's even better. But you know, I think the conversation had started with whoever I was talking to losing a recruit to somebody that was not as good. You know, I thought, well, they're not going to go there and win. And he said, well, their track record of taking that, you know, position of an athlete and sending them to the pros is so high, they felt like they should go there instead. And so I think when you've got Alabama with their track record of success and then their track record of sending guys to the NFL, I just think it's one of those, it's sort of a, you know, the hamster wheel gets going and it's hard to slow down because these players see the chance to go win and play at a higher level after their Alabama career is over, and they want to get on. It's interesting, though. I was talking with somebody recently about the transfer portal, and I know when the transfer portal first started, I thought, well, everybody's just going to go to Alabama. They're going to have everybody. They're going to have, you know, 22 All-Americans. I mean, they're going to dominate. And I think the transfer portal has actually flattened it out. And it's not made it as easy to stockpile. So Bama's still really good. Georgia's obviously really good too. But I think it's starting to flatten a little bit because players don't want to go and wait. They don't want to sit behind somebody and wait until they're older or their time or whatever. So I think the transfer portal is flattening it out a little bit. So it's going to be interesting to see if Bama, I mean, I don't know if anybody can replicate what Nick Saban did for the last 17 years. I mean, the amount of championships that they won, it's just crazy. And I don't know if you can do that again. And especially now that there's, you know, transfer portal and the money and NIL that's going to convince some athletes to go play for schools that maybe don't have the tradition. But I think the Alabama monster was built with the tradition, the ongoing success, and the NFL pedigree.
Okay, Jenni.
Perfect. Thank you all. I appreciate it.